Child Beauty Queen, The Murder of Jon Benet Ramsey, 1996. John and Patricia Ramsey returned from a Christmas party on December 25, 1996, to their 15-room Tudor-style mansion in Boulder, Colorado. This college town of 96,000 is located in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains about 30 miles northwest of Denver. John, 53, was president of Access Graphics, a $1 billion subsidiary of Lockheed Aeronautics. Beauty queen Patsy Ramsey, 39, was a former Miss West Virginia. The couple put their two young children to bed, 9-year-old Burke and 6-year-old Jon Benet. The kindergarten student was a tiny beauty pageant queen who was named Little Miss Colorado 1995 and America's Tiny Little Miss 1996. John Ramsey's children from his previous marriage, John Andrew Ramsey, 20, and Melinda Ramsey, 25, lived with their mother, Lucinda Johnson. Once the house was quiet, the Ramseys went to sleep. The next morning, on December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey phoned police at 5:52 a.m. The grief-stricken mother said that Jon Benet had been kidnapped and she found a ransom note on one of the mansion's 2 staircases. The ransom note read, "Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business but not the country that it serves. At this time we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attached to the bank. When you get home you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence an earlier delivery pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The 2 gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. By the way, before we continue it, please subscribe it and like it. We bow in front of you and thank for watching it. This unusually long ransom note demanded an odd amount of money, which happened to be the same as John Ramsey's corporate bonus for 1996. The police discovered that the paper on which the note was written had been taken from a pad of paper found inside the family's home. The ink was from a felt-tipped pen the Ramseys kept in their kitchen. Police officers, detectives, and crime scene technicians arrived at the house. The Ramseys called friends Fleet White, John Fernie, and their wives to come over for emotional support. A minister from the Ramseys church and 2 victims' advocates who worked for the city of Boulder also arrived at the mansion. However, the police did not seal off the crime scene to protect evidence. The parade of visitors was allowed to wander freely around the 6,500-square-foot house, contaminating potential evidence. Access to Jon Benet's bedroom was not sealed off until 10:45 a.m., 4 hours after the police were first called to the scene. It had snowed lightly several times in the days. Detectives searched the house but found no signs of forced entry or any fresh footprints in the snow outside, which led them to suspect that no intruder had entered the house and committed the murder. Meanwhile, the 10 a.m. deadline that the kidnappers had given in their ransom note passed without a phone call to arrange for the money's delivery, and investigators allowed John Ramsey to go downstairs to his basement without a police escort. He later claimed that he had discovered that a broken window was open there. He closed it and returned upstairs without telling detectives what he had seen. A few hours later, Detective Linda Arndt asked Fleet White and John Fernie to take Ramsey through the house to see if any personal items may have been stolen. When the trio reached the basement, White pointed out the broken window. Ramsey said that he had broken it the previous summer. Once again, he failed to mention that he had found it open earlier. The three men continued to walk around the basement. Minutes later, John Ramsey peeked into a room that was being transformed into a wine room. White had already checked it and seen nothing. This time, Ramsey discovered his daughter lying on the floor wrapped in a blanket. She was dead. Her arms were above her head. A cord was tied around her right wrist, and another piece of cord was wrapped around her neck. One of Patsy Ramsey's broken paintbrush handles had been inserted between the cord and Jon Benet's neck to make a crude garrote. Rather than leaving the body where it was and alerting police, Ramsey picked up his daughter in his arms and carried her lifeless body upstairs. He placed her under the family Christmas tree and told Arndt, "It has to be an inside job." A blanket was placed on Jon Benet. In the process, this may have tainted any evidence that remained on her. By the evening of December 26, the Ramseys had retained a lawyer. The following day, a team of 3 lawyers and private investigators that the Ramseys had hired questioned Fleet White and his wife at home. The Ramseys also hired a public relations specialist and John Douglas, a retired profiler of serial killers who had once worked for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. John and Patsy Ramsey soon also each hired their own separate legal counsel. Contamination of the crime scene, which began when Patsy phoned police, continued. On December 28, her sister, who had come from Georgia to be with the family, entered the house to take clothes for John, Patsy, and Burke to wear to Jon Benet's funeral. She entered the mansion at least 6 times and left with bags, boxes, and suitcases that may have contained evidence in the murder case. The items she retrieved included jewelry, credit cards, some of Jon Benet's dresses, and stuffed toys. A police officer advised detectives that Patsy's sister was removing far more than a few items of clothing from the house, but they offered no instructions to stop her. The Ramseys believed that their daughter's killer knew the family would be away for a few hours on Christmas Day and would be back later. According to their theory, the killer planned to kidnap Jon Benet in exchange for a ransom. He entered the house while the Ramseys were attending a Christmas party at the Whites' home and wrote the ransom note while he waited. Then he hid until the family returned home and went to sleep. He walked upstairs to Jon Benet's room and likely used a stun gun to render her unconscious. Then he carried her down to the basement and accidentally killed her during a sadistic sexual assault and fled, leaving the body behind. Police investigation. The detectives did not agree, however, as a number of details just did not add up. No stun gun was ever found at the scene, but the ransom note and the body were both found inside the home. They also wondered why Patsy Ramsey had offered different explanations about how events had unfolded. She initially told police that she had checked on Jon Benet at 5:45 a.m. and realized that her daughter was not in her bed. Then she found the ransom note on the stairs. In a subsequent version, she claimed that she had been on her way to the kitchen to get coffee when she found the note on the stairs. She said she then went to check on her daughter and discovered that she was missing. An autopsy on Jon Benet Ramsey concluded that she had been strangled to death and the right side of her skull had been fractured. She showed signs of more minor injuries, and she also appeared to have been sexually assaulted. A pubic hair was found on the blanket in which her body was wrapped. She had vaginal abrasions, her genitals appeared to have been wiped, and several dark fibers were found. A scan using ultraviolet light indicated the possibility of traces of semen on her thighs. Some DNA evidence was found under her fingernails and on the crotch of her underwear. Police took a palm print from the door of the room in which Jon Benet's body was found, but they were unable to identify it. The Ramseys said that a black flashlight found on the kitchen counter did not belong to them, and detectives were not able to trace its owner. Investigators found a footprint on the floor next to the body and identified it as an imprint from a high-tech sports shoe, but it, too, was never matched to the actual shoe. Blood, hair, and handwriting samples were taken from members of the Ramsey family and some of their friends. In the months following the murder, 8 detectives were assigned to the case. They interviewed 590 people and cleared more than 100 suspects. They collected 1,058 pieces of physical evidence and sent more than 500 for testing at forensic laboratories. They included hair, blood, handwriting samples, and other items from 215 people. Investigators also followed leads in 17 states and 2 foreign countries. This murder was particularly marked by the media frenzy of tabloid coverage. Reporters from as far away as France and Australia converged on Boulder to cover the story. Reporters staked out the company of John Ramsey's father, Jon Benet Ramsey. They were also chased from the University of Colorado fraternity house where Jon Benet's stepbrother lived, and her grandparents' home near Atlanta. More than 20 camera crews and 100 reporters crammed into city council chambers in Boulder for a news conference in the week following the murder. The Ramseys hired crisis communications expert Patrick S. Corton to work with the media. The former spokesman for the U.S. Department of Justice had handled media relations for such incidents as the 1985 hijacking of the Achille Lauro cruise liner. Corton posted the Ramsey family's statements on a website created especially for the media that were covering the murder. He also arranged for reporters to photograph the family being consoled by Bishop Jerry Winterode of the Episcopal Diocese of Colorado at the door of their church on January 5, 1997. I am trying to make sure that stories that might have some unfavorable view on the family not get out without hearing from me, Corton told the New York Times. The media coverage was marked by checkbook journalism by outlets thirsty for news. They paid for interviews with the victim's pageant costume seamstress or with a nanny who stopped working for the family before Jon Benet was born. The Globe paid $5,500 for 5 crime scene photos and matched the $50,000 reward that the Ramsey family posted for information leading to a conviction in the case. The Sigma Photo Agency paid $7,500 to a photographer for his archive of Jon Benet modeling photos. CBS won a bidding war against ABC and paid $4,000 for 1984 video footage of the interior of the Ramsey home. In January 1997, former Deputy Sheriff Brent A. Sawyer and former photo laboratory employee Lawrence S. Smith were arrested and charged with obstructing government operations. They had sold stolen crime scene photos to the Globe and were later fined and sentenced to 3 days of solitary confinement in jail. Police cleared Burke Ramsey of any involvement in his sister's assault and murder. His stepbrother and stepsister, who had been staying with their mother in Atlanta at the time of the murder, were cleared in March 1997. This occurred nearly 3 months after Jon Benet was killed because John Ramsey had hired an Atlanta lawyer who instructed them not to cooperate with police, which delayed the police's ability to interview them and conclude they had no connection to the murder. That same month, DNA testing was delayed when the prosecutor's office in Boulder asked the Ramseys if they wanted to have a family representative present to observe the DNA testing. They responded 2 weeks later, after returning from a 1-week vacation in Sea Island, Georgia, that it wasn't necessary. No semen was found on Jon Benet's body, nor in her bedroom or in the basement where her body was found. In the first few months following their daughter's murder, the Ramseys gave the Boulder police samples of their handwriting, including some that copied the ransom note's wording, but in their own writing. John Ramsey was quickly cleared, after police determined that his writing was not similar to that which was found on the ransom note. Patsy Ramsey submitted 5 handwriting samples to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation to compare with the 370-word ransom note. They also searched the family's summer home in Charlevoix, Michigan, for unrehearsed writing samples belonging to her. Police could not say whether she was the author of the note, but they could not exclude her either. On the advice of their lawyers, the Ramseys refused to give police formal videotaped interviews. They finally broke their silence 4 months later. On April 30, 1997, John Ramsey submitted to a 2-hour tape-recorded police interview and Patsy Ramsey was interrogated for 6 hours. A few days later, in May, they held a news conference to proclaim their innocence. They also bought a full-page advertisement in the Boulder Daily Camera featuring a kindergarten picture of Jon Benet to promote their $100,000 reward for information leading to their daughter's killer, but it yielded no new information. The media's fascination with the story continued. In December 1997, reporters packed Boulder's city council chambers for a rare news conference on the case. CNN, NBC, MSNBC, and the Fox network broadcast the half-hour news conference live across the country. The tabloid The Globe posted $500,000 for information leading to the conviction of Jon Benet's killer. The National Enquirer offered the Ramseys $1 million to take a polygraph test administered by technicians hired by the newspaper. In June 1998, prosecutors questioned the Ramseys for 3 days, separately, in videotaped interviews. They also conducted an interview with the couple's son Burke in the family's new home in Atlanta. A grand jury was convened 3 months later, in September 1998, to investigate Jon Benet's killing and to use its powers to subpoena information that the police had been unable to access for nearly 2 years. A grand jury can indict someone if it finds probable cause that the person committed the crime. The Ramseys had refused to meet for an interview with Commander Mark Beckner, who took over as Boulder's police chief in December 1997. A grand jury can force evidence to be turned over. Witnesses can invoke their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, but a grand jury can offer them immunity to compel them to testify. Spouses can be forced to testify against each other in cases of major crimes, such as a murder or child abuse, if the victim is under the age of 12 and the suspect was a person in a position of trust. The grand jury, which was convened on September 15, 1998, was composed of 4 men and 8 women. They reviewed more than 30,000 pages of reports and hundreds of pieces of evidence, including the cord and paintbrush that were used to strangle Jon Benet. They also heard from handwriting experts, police, detectives, Burke, and John Ramsey's adult children Melinda Ramsey Long and John Andrew Ramsey. However, John and Patsy Ramsey were never called to testify. 13 months later, in October 1999, prosecutors said that they did not have enough evidence to charge anyone with killing Jon Benet, and the grand jury was dismissed. Fingers were pointed at shoddy police work that allowed the crime scene to be repeatedly contaminated and a district attorney's alleged deference to the Ramseys by not questioning them for months. In 1999, Colorado Governor Bill Owens decided not to appoint a special prosecutor in the case, but he also accused the Ramseys of hiding behind their lawyers. The Ramseys published a memoir called Death of Innocence a year later in 2000. That year, on August 4, a private investigator that the Ramseys had hired gave police a pair of high-tech boots, size 8½, which allegedly matched the mildew footprint that was found in the family's basement on December 26, 1996. The boots looked similar to others that could also be a match. Boulder police sent them to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation for analysis, but their owner was never identified. On August 7, 2001, a subscriber to America Online posted a message on his website claiming to have witnessed Jon Benet's murder. He said, "I feel so guilty for what I've done. I was there when the whole thing occurred. I never wanted any part in it, but they said if I didn't help I would be killed as well. I was only 14 when this took place, so I went along with the whole plan." Police thought that they had a new lead. America Online in Dulles, Virginia, provided them with the subscriber's name on September 8, 2001, but as with other leads before it, this one petered out. 2 years later, an Atlanta judge dismissed a lawsuit against the Ramseys that was brought by a journalist the couple claimed was a potential suspect in their daughter's murder. The judge said that it was just as likely for an intruder to be the culprit. Boulder's district attorney Mary Lacey agreed. Patsy Ramsey, then 49, died of ovarian cancer in June 2006. 2 months later, American schoolteacher John M. Carr was arrested in Bangkok, Thailand, on August 16, 2006, in connection with Jon Benet's murder. Hordes of reporters tracked the story, from his arrest to his extradition back to the United States. Carr had lived in Conyers, Georgia, while the Ramseys lived in the Atlanta suburb of Dunwoody about 30 miles away before they moved to Colorado. He came to the police's attention when they were considering him as a possible suspect in connection with child pornography. In an exchange of emails and telephone conversations with a University of Colorado professor, Carr had said that he was interested in young girls, particularly 6-year-olds. Using the pseudonym Daxis, he claimed to have left a garrote around Jon Benet's neck too long and then hit her on the head. Carr already faced 5 misdemeanor counts in California for possessing child pornography on his computer. He had been held in Sonoma County Jail for 6 months in 2001 and was released. A judge issued a warrant for his arrest when he failed to appear for a court date. The case against him in connection with the Ramsey murder collapsed 2 weeks after Carr's arrest, when DNA tests refuted his claims that he had killed her. Authorities also investigated his whereabouts at the time of the murder in 1996, and that is when they discovered that he had spent Christmas with his family. In July 2008, Boulder County District Attorney Mary T. Lacey sent a letter to John Ramsey. She indicated that a private laboratory, Bode Technology Group from Lorton, Virginia, tested material that had been scraped from the waistband of the long johns that Jon Benet was wearing the night she died. Newly developed touch DNA analysis looked for traces of genetic material that could not be detected using earlier forensic techniques. It discovered traces of an unidentified male's DNA on Jon Benet's long johns that was not from a family member. It was most likely from the killer, who would have handled her long johns as he removed them that night. The DNA traces matched those taken from a drop of blood found on Jon Benet's underwear early on in the investigation. That drop of blood was not from a member of the Ramsey family, either. In the letter, Lacey said that the results of this latest test vindicated the Ramsey family, but it did not solve the murder. What happened inside the Ramsey home the night of December 26, 1996, remains a mystery. All stories are worth telling and all voice worth to be heard even if she, can't speak himself, herself. We respect all human life. Please subscribe it and like it. We bow before you and thank for watching.